Yay, it says recording. So this is a Q&A on Halloween of 2020. And it's going to be a full moon tonight. Doesn't that just sound lovely? And a bunch of crazies out there. So mostly I wanted to just kind of go through this and give a chance for some of you to feel what it feels like to be in a Q&A with me. And so I had some of you send in, and I've got questions from a lot of you. And so I'll go through those questions and we'll see if we can't get through as many as possible as time allows, right? Because I can talk forever, as some of you probably already know. So I'm just going to start with the ones kind of in order that I got them in, or at least that I put them on my handy dandy little sheet of paper. So Kristen, and I know Kristen wasn't going to be here, so this is for her. She will want the recording anyway, and she was the first one that I got a question from. So Kristen writes, a question for you. Is it possible for a gaited horse, mine is a Missouri Foxtrotter, to both gait and trot, and for me to have separate cues for each? Or is that just too far confusing for them? I wonder because I love to ride dressage and work on her trot, etc., but I'm also very interested in getting a nice gait for trail rides. My mare is very lazy, but now tends to trot when I speed her up, and I can work on refining it, but I am worried that also working on her gait will confuse her, and I don't know which to focus on. Also wondering if the live session will be recorded, as I have to work tomorrow. So Kristen, this is for you. So basically, yes, you can go ahead and have your horses trot and canter. It's not my personal preference, but it doesn't mean that you can't. But the other thing that I want you to think about too is that there are other forms of dressage that you can do out there. Dressage just means high-level training. It doesn't mean you have to trot. Yes, your traditional trainers are all going to think about trot, but there's two different versions of there's Western dressage and there's Cowboy Dressage, both of which have a gated division. And so you can go ahead and play in both of those. The Cowboy Dressage is really quite nice because it's kind of a new and up and coming thing, and their judges are working towards being better about that. And a lot of their clinicians are very, very good at being warm and welcoming the gaited horses. And so basically things like the circles and things are really useful for our gaited horses, even though we tend to not do very much of it and need to do more. And that's part of one of the things that I try and get people to do more of in my clinics and courses, is helping them with circles, because circles are really important for our gaited horses. And so the biggest thing that you want to do is, it sounds like your mare is on the trotty side of the gait scale. And so when you're working on it, you might want to focus on one or the other for a while. And so you get your cue really good for what it is that you want it to be for gait. And the biggest thing that I can say to you is, it's not so much about a cue as it is about the way you ride it. So in normal horses, walk, trot, canter horses, we have different fluidity styles. And so lots of you that are familiar with Pirelli, right? We talk about fluidity, right? And so there's different ways that we ride the walk versus the trot versus the canter. And so that's the most important thing, is that we have to remember we have to do in our body what we want our horses to do in their body. And so that's the best way that we can tell our horses which gait it is that we want them to do, is by us riding it. So first off, we have to know what that is, but you can all practice riding the gait that you want when your horse is walking slowly, like a normal horse walks, because normal horse walking is the same as our gaits, especially if you, like, say, have a walking horse, or it's an even 4-beat gait. And so all of them are even 4-beat gaits. So, or at least the even 4-beat gait is one of those things that we head towards, not necessarily with the Foxtrotter, which is what she has, but you're headed more towards that. So there's 4 beats when we have a gaited horse that becomes smooth. If it's only 2-beat, then you're probably at a pace and it's probably not so smooth. Now, granted, I have ridden plenty of gaited horses out there that have a very smooth pace. Doesn't mean that it's perfect, but if you like it, great. But that's where we have to think about it. But even if I'm going to ride a 2-beat and it's going to be a trot versus a pace 2-beat, it goes this way versus a trot 2-beat is more this way. And so you'll feel yourself sway back and forth side to side when you're on a pacing horse that's 2-beat versus a trotting horse that's 2-beat. And so that's the biggest thing, is how many beats are you riding? And that's how you can tell your horse which one it is that you want. Like when Linda talks about sitting trot, she talks about Linda Pirelli, when she talks about her throw up muscle. And so it's more up this way when you're sitting your trot. Well, gaited horses don't do that when they pace, right? And so if you're thinking this, then that's going to be your trot. If you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's your gait. And so that's one of the best ways that you can teach your horse which one it is that you want, is by you making sure that you ride it each time that you're doing it. And also focusing on one and getting that good so that you can call for that one, and then you can call for the other one at a different time. But if you're having trouble finding the gait because she's tending to trot more, then I would stay away from the trot for a little bit and play with the gait and get her really into that idea of things. And then you can add in a little bit of trot and then go back to gait, and a little bit of trot and go back to gait. But also don't forget that there are plenty of other disciplines out there that dressage doesn't have to be about trotting. And so there's Cowboy Dressage, there's Western Dressage, and there's also Gaited Dressage in an English saddle too. So there are those disciplines out there. You just have to look for them. That doesn't mean that your trainer or whoever, the local dressage trainer on the corner is going to understand that. But you can just say, I want to work on my walk and making it better, and utilizing that. It doesn't have to be in a trot. So hopefully that answers Christy's question. And let me just check and make sure. Because she said that she's fairly lazy, and so she's wanting to trot more. So that was my guess, is that her horse is possibly headed more towards the trot. So hopefully that works for Christy. And does that kind of make sense to some of you guys? You can just nod heads if that resonates with you a little bit, even if you don't ever want to trot your horse. You don't have to. I don't ever trot my horses. So anyway, okay, so then Nancy, who happens to be on the call, yay, she says, my biggest nemesis is maintain gait and any and all. Okay. But at a running walk, when I'm trying to ride with my seat, a figure 8 with my hips, I'm not cueing him right. Loren says, wiggle, wiggle. No, let's say inappropriate pelvic maneuvers.
Hump is hump. Like a camel has a hump. You can say hump.
I love you.
And just not go there in your head.
Okay, super. So anyway, which of course got me laughing, right? She said it right afterwards. So in her sentences. So see you tomorrow. Okay, so the deal here is that when we think about our running walk, and maintain gait in all of our gaits can be really difficult. And it is actually difficult in trotting horses as well. But what happens is that people don't see the change happen so much because they only have 3 gaits, right? They have walk, trot, canter. And so the horse is still trotting, but he may not have a very good quality trot. And so you can see the trot improve throughout their thing. Like this morning when I was watching Linda ride Hot Jazz, the things that she did, Christoph Hess would tell her inside leg, and then it would improve his trot. And so his trot would change just a little bit. And so that's what happens with our gait too, is that it changes just a little bit. But what happens for us, because we all ride gaited horses, is that we don't have that straight 2-beat gait. We can vary it a little bit. So what happens is that the hind legs may speed up or slow down, or he may dump a little weight on the forehand. And in all actuality, all of a sudden we've actually technically changed a gait because the footfall's changed. And so, so that's the hard part with us. And so be a little bit more lenient on yourself as to what that gait change is. Originally, when I started Pirelli, they said anything between a normal horse walk and a canter was a gait. Well, as you all well know, you could do a gazillion things in between that walk and the canter. And there's no such thing as called maintain gait when you're doing that, right? So, you know, what happens is you think about that gait scale, and if you have trot on one end and pace on the other, if you go, okay, anything between walk and canter is a gait, start out there and be nice to yourself, right? And then you get closer and closer and closer and closer to center. So then you cut out the pace and you cut out the trot. Woohoo! You know, we've cut off some of the extra garbage. And so as your level goes up, then you get closer and closer to the center, so that it doesn't look like it changes very much. Because like when you watch Linda Pirelli ride her horses, she's trotting and it looks perfect, or Pat for that matter, right? They're both on a perfect trot and it doesn't seem like very much changes, but they'll tell you little things changed, or I did this and it got better. And so we all do that. And that's one of my big failures, is that I'm always looking for the better gait. And so I keep striving for better and what is better and what is better and what is better. And so the thing that I have to go back to for myself for when I go showing is, how do I make it maintainable rather than keep trying to get better and better and better? Because my horse can't continuously get better, but I'll get better moments, right? And if I get better moments, then I've changed my gait just a little bit. So I have to go, okay, well, where do I want it to be? And I may not have to go for better when I'm playing with maintain gait. I go, okay, this is the gait that I want, and this is the one that is fairly easy and fairly consistent for my horse. So that's where I'm going to call it for today. And even though I am almost always striving for that better, I have to go, okay, where is it? And I'm going to try and hit that one. But it might be a big range. You know, I've gotten rid of pace and trot out here on the outsides, and I've gotten in here and I go, okay, yeah, it's a 4-beat. I got a 4-beat, and that's great. Or do I want to have a great big head shake? And so everybody is going to be a little bit different as to where you're at, but you're the one that gets to pick it. And the thing for you, like when you say maintain gait, like on a figure 8, so the trouble with the figure 8 is that there's bends that happen in there. And so when we change the bend, that's when things get messy. And they get messy for trotting horse people too. They just don't change gaits when they get messy, where we change gaits when we get messy. And so that's where you go, oh, I know what happened. So how do I make those bends not so influential so that they actually change my gait? Because one of the biggest things that we can do to change our gait is to put a bend in our horse. And so what happens is that a lot of times we try and do itty bitty weeny teeny figure 8s rather than big ones. So the bigger a figure 8 you do, the easier it will be to be able to maintain that gait, because you put less of a bend in your horse. And so what happens is, especially when you come through that center, that's when things tend to get messy, because you go to switch the bend. And so the biggest thing that we can think about is prepping our horse. And so we prep them, we're going into the corner, into the turn, and then we need to have a straight piece. Have our straight piece and have it be long enough that we can change the weight and get the bend ready to go the other way. And it's all about being smooth and elegant when we get it done. And so the bigger the figure 8, the better off it is. And if our horse understands the pattern, that's where the power of patterns come in, then that becomes much easier. But doing it slow and right beats fast and wrong every day, versus trying to like just yang through it and hope that it goes well. Because as we change things in our body, and we're trying so hard to do it off of our seat, right? That changes our horse, and he says, oh, you want me to bend the other way? I wasn't quite ready, and he has to get his legs all out of the way to get that done. So that's where we have to just go real smooth and slow and make sure that it's big enough and that we take the time enough to prepare ahead enough that we can get that done. And that's the tough part, is that usually you're going to need a little bit more time. And if your maintain gait isn't consistent going around in a normal circle without changing the direction, then that's going to be also difficult. But like at a running walk, I think about it like when I do, so we'll kind of go back to Christy's question on dressage. When I do cowboy dressage, I do, and this is basically what they kind of tell you to do anyway, is I do a normal horse walk for my first gait when they call for walk. When they call for intermediate gait, I do basically my flat walk. And if you have walking horses, you know that we have another version, which is our running walk. So I think of running walk more like an extended trot in dressage. And so where do you see extended trot in dressage, right? It's usually going across the diagonal. And then they slow down before they get to the corner, right? Because they can't maintain that crazy thing going around corners very well either. And not until, and I don't even know because I have never personally been that high in dressage, whether or not there's patterns where they have them do an extended trot in a bend. I don't know. That would be somebody of higher dressage level than I am. But you know, typically that's not something that they do. So think about where's that high rate of speed? It's on a straightaway, especially in the beginning. Like if you watched Loren's thing this morning, she was doing corners game, point to points for her horse to help him learn to sit on his hindquarters and do that extended trot. She stopped him before the corner in the corners game, and then slowly walked him through the corner, picked up a normal trot, then went through the next corner, and then picked up her extended trot on the straightaway. So that's the thing that we have to think about is what is it that we do with our horses. And lower level dressage, we do, a trot on a normal horse is done on a 20-meter circle. So think about how big is a 20-meter circle? That's a 60-foot arena. So they can do a figure eight like that, right? So think about how tight are you asking for those figure eight patterns to be, and whether or not you're being realistic for your horse. And that's just a normal trot. That's not an extended trot. And obviously, the slower your speed, the tighter your compaction or your circles can be. And Pat does little things, but even Pat, when we do precision riding in the precision pen, he has, I'm going to draw this because this will make no sense. So he draws it, and he'll do like a 10-meter circle in one corner, and then you're not allowed to switch. You're not allowed to switch, like if there was a 10-meter circle here, you're not allowed to do that figure eight. You go around the circle here, and then you come over here, go straight, and you do this one here. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So he won't let you do this circle to this circle until you're a higher level. He wants you to do this circle, go a full straightaway, and hit this circle before you turn. When we're doing, and that's precision. That's not even freestyle. That's finesse, right? And so even if we're doing it with one hand, that's where he wants us to do that, because it's not fair to our horses to do a figure eight that tiny at a trot. And realistically, like dressage land, I don't think it's up until you get a little higher level that you end up doing 10-meter circles at a trot. It's typically a 20. So think about, a lot of times what happens is we just get ahead of ourselves and go, oh, I should make this turn. And our horse goes, and he's completely off balance. Does that make sense a little? So the biggest thing is can we decide what that gait is going to be and maintain it on a bigger circle first? And then can we change the bend and make that happen and have it go reasonably well? And that maintaining gait happens with making sure that we ride it first, because a lot of times what happens is in our fluidity, we don't keep riding the gait. We ride whatever it is that they gave us. And so we're just like, oh yeah, sure. And we flop around with them, but we have to stay steady.
Oftentimes it's not flopping around with them. It's a new gait, and it's within that scale of gaits. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's in the good one.
Yeah, because you're already down here, right?
Yeah, and it feels good. So you smile.
And you go with it, and you're like, yay, this is awesome. And that's where that leadership thing comes up. And that's where, like, especially, how many of you had trouble on circling game? If you played circling game, maintain gait with your gaited horse. Yeah, raise hands. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing is that's about us deciding where that variation comes. And somebody wrote in here, and I'm sure we'll get to it at some point, but where does the variation in gaits come? And so what happens is that I have to be the one that chooses. And it depends a little bit on which horse I'm playing with, what I'm going to choose. Like if I have a youngster that doesn't know much, then I may give him a bigger leeway, right? If I have like one of my guys that I know can maintain gait, then I'm going to tell him which one it is that I want, or I'm going to be picky about it. And I'm going to say, no, not like that. I need it like this. And I can even do that on my warm blood. I have a warm blood as well. And so my warm blood, who's young, he goes out and he does this little itty bitty boring walk. I'm like, you can do a way better walk than that. I need it. And he like couldn't understand. So I had to explain to him that there was a difference between that walk and trot. And so it was just a little bit, but I have to be the one that's particular. So one of the things that I think about for my horses that I kind of make what is normal horse walk? And that's that slow, looks like a normal
dog
walk. So boring. Dog walk. I call it a dog walk. Lots of people do. It's just boring, but that's normal horse walk. So then when they pick up a little bit of energy, and it may not be that much faster, but when they pick up that energy and they start to have a little power and a little push from behind, that's when I decided that I've hit my intermediate gait. And then then that can go a long ways. It can go much faster. It can go much slower, but you can, everybody gets to make that decision on their own with their own individual horse based on where he's at in the moment. It doesn't mean that it's not going to change at some point.
Okay.
And so you can move that bar because it's such a scale, move that bar. But that's where I kind of make that break. And I'm like, if they're a new horse to me, I'm going to say no pacing and no trotting, unless I'm having an emotional malfunction. And then I will deal with the emotional malfunction first and then deal with which gait it is that I'm doing, because I just need to get them emotionally together and then we can have a good conversation. But if the sky is falling, just move the feet until the sky quits falling. And usually the energy will come down and then you can have a better attempt at a gait. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, super. Cool. All right. So then, Angela. Do I have Angela on here? I don't think I have Angela on here. That's okay. Angela Reynolds, she says, hi, Jenny. My 3-year-old generator Sundrop colt has gotten very tall, but has finally leveled off in his height. Our problem is he has a stumbling problem with his front end. It's like he hasn't figured out what to do with his front end. Is there anything I can do to help him figure out he needs to pick his feet up? I'm intimidated to ride him due to this issue. Yeah, nobody likes to fall down. And so this is a Tennessee walking horse. I just know that because I know the bloodlines. And so what happens is that as our youngsters grow up, they're just like teenagers, right? We get to gangly stages, and the bigger they are, the more gangly they are for longer, is what it seems like to me in my years of time with them. And so it's just like young teenage boys, right? They're going to be a basketball player. They look super awkward for a really long time. So we have to help them with that a little bit. Some of it is just growing up. And so there's some things that you can do that help that. Which may or may not, because I know Angela is big into showing. So one of the things that happens is that you can go ahead and bring their breakover back. So cut their toe off a little bit sometimes will help them because they get stuck and they trip over their own front feet. So you can bring their breakover back. That will change their gait and change their way of going. So that may not be helpful, especially if he's on the pacey end of the spectrum. So now we have to go back to that spectrum. That's why we have this spectrum, is so that we go, okay, well, what are we going to do? So that may not be an option for her, because when she cuts the toe off, he may end up pacing like a big bad dog, and that's not very much fun either. So we think about that and we go, okay, well, what are some other things that we can do? So having him learn to pick up his feet somewhere other than an arena is really important. So thinking about some undulating ground is a great one. Obviously, lots of people are going to tell you cavalettis. I personally don't like cavalettis because I also do showing. I don't want my hocks to pick up either because I want my hocks to slide forward and backward and not lift up like a trotting horse. So if the front end goes across a cavaletti, the hind end has to come too, right? So, so for me, I think more about undulating ground. And since she's a little worried about riding him, playing outside on undulating ground can be really useful as well, because then you're not so worried about the gait he's doing and whether or not he falls down. And if he does happen to fall down, he gets to feel it on his own and hit his own mouth on the ground. And that will usually help them think about not falling down again. But if you're on them, it's not a fun trip to ride. So that's where you think about, okay, can I go play with him outside? So the other thing that we think about too is that one of the reasons horses trip a lot, or the major reason that horses trip, is because they're emotionally not connected to their feet. So they could be emotionally scattered and thinking about the birds and the bees and everything else that happens to be around them. So if they're worried about, where the barn is, where their buddies are, anything like that, that means they're looking around and not paying attention to what their feet are doing. Okay. So that's a major reason for tripping. Now, in young horses, it's horses 3, right? 3-year-olds have an attention span like a gnat. So they're doing whatever, and then they're like, oh, butterfly, strange thing. And so what do you think they forget about? Yeah, those things down there, right? So so that's where, it's part of just the growing older, getting used to themselves. So growing into themselves, thinking about down to their feet is part of that. And so we want to help them think down to their feet. And so 7 games with natural horsemanship is part of that. So it doesn't mean that you're maybe going to go over a lot of cavalettis and obstacles, or cavalettis, but you can use obstacles like things like bridges, stuff where they have to concentrate and think down to their feet. So you might have them, go put their front feet on a bridge, go put their front feet somewhere else, go do some things where there's some obstacles, but not necessarily trotting or intermediate gaiting over a set of 4 poles. Does that make sense? So there can just be things that you play with, whether or not that's like, can you go put your feet up on a tire and then walk over a tire? Can you do lots of different things where you're thinking down to where your feet are, so that your attention is drawn to those hooves and where they're at, and thinking about what's happening in the moment rather than gawking at the butterflies and the horse that's over there and oh, look, there's a blade of grass that's blowing in the wind. So that's where most of our tripping issues come from, is that our horse isn't thinking down to his feet. And then after those sorts of things, we can start to think about, can they find a place where they start to lift up their front end. And again, just like in dressage, we don't expect them to have carrying power on their hindquarters until they get some things under their belts. Like as a 3-year-old, going forward is important. Can we go forward? Can we turn? Can we stop? Those sorts of things. When we head to competition, that's when we start to put an age date on it, especially in like our breed shows, whether or not it's gaited or non-gaited. We start to put a time frame on how fast we want these horses to develop. Whereas like in dressage, you don't get a top level horse until he's older, and they get worried if you've got a top level horse that's really young, because they're afraid that that horse is gonna break down because they've put so much stress on him. So so thinking about, then can I get my horse to think about transferring the weight to the hindquarters? Because once my weight starts to transfer to the hindquarters, then even if I do stumble, my weight's back there. But if my weight's on the forequarters and I stumble, I'm going to go ass over tea kettle. I have to take a drink or I'm going to cough. So that's where we start to think about transferring that weight back. Can I transfer the weight back so that I'm not so stumbly on the front end anymore? And like as a 3-year-old, they're just learning to deal with that. So things like backing up are really important. Sideways is also very important. So can I do that? And I can do all of those things from the ground until I feel like he's a little bit more capable of not falling on his face. I'd also probably turn him out, Angela. I'm not sure whether or not you do or not, but a lot of times our youngsters, especially if they're show horses, don't get as much turnout. And so turnout is super important so they can figure that stuff out on their own without you on them. And preferably in an uneven hilly pasture is preferable rather than flat. Unfortunately, my pasture and my paddocks are flat because I live on a hayfield basically. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for me. So anyway, hopefully that works for Angela, and I will find a way to get this to her as well. I'll figure out where I'm going to post this after we're done. Let's see. Oh, Lauren, yay, Lauren's here. At least he was there. There he is. You guys keep moving around. It's like musical squares on my screen. So Lauren says, I have a 13-year-old Palomino Missouri Foxtrotter mare. She is a left brain extrovert. You've seen my horse at the clinics that Cheryl has sponsored in Princeton, Minnesota. I've had her for 10 years. I've been doing the Pirelli training with her since I got her. I have a great connection with her. I have had a problem trail riding with a friend's 10-year-old Palomino Missouri Foxtrotter gelding. It's just because you guys are like the Palomino connection. Goodness sakes, 2 Palominos, both Missouri Foxtrotters. Just kidding. He is a left brain introvert. Trail riding with them, the person that rides him doesn't keep him moving. So he slows down and they fall behind. And then she puts him into a gait or a canter and catches up. When they get even with us, the horse slows down and starts falling behind again. This repeats during the trail ride. I can keep my horse in a consistent gait during a trail ride. The problem occurs when she catches up and goes gaiting or cantering past and goes ahead of us. My horse gets competitive and wants to chase after them. My horse gets excited and wants to go. When we do catch up, the other horse slows down and we eventually pass them again. The 2 horses start arguing with their ears. In May of this year, this happened during an 8-mile ride, and towards the end of the ride, the other horse kicked my horse with the hind feet and missed my horse, but caught me on the ankle. I broke the end of my fibula. I'm back to normal now. I'm riding again. My horse doesn't do this with any other horse. The owner of the other horse says the 10-year-old, her 10-year-old Palomino Missouri Foxtrotter gelding picks on her other 3 horses at home and tries to get them moving, etc. Sounds like the horse is trying to dominate the other horses at home. Sometimes the 2 horses get into an argument just riding side by side. I'm looking for your advice on how to deal with this on the trail. Okay, so here's how we go. And this may not necessarily be the answer that you want, but that's okay. So here's the deal, is that when one of the ways that we deal with trail riding with Pirelli is that number 1, the horse that is the slowest goes in front. Number 2, the fastest horse is at the end of the line. And so the reason for that is for the very reason that you just got yourself into trouble. And so the deal is that the horses behind are not allowed to pass the horses in front unless you do it on purpose. But there's no necessarily riding side by side on a trail ride like that, because you do get that racehorse mentality of I'm in front, you're in front. And that sort of thing happens. So the deal is we do this thing called the beep beep game. Have you ever heard of it? Who's heard of the beep beep game? Yes. Okay. So beep beep game, what we do is obviously your horse has to be used to you riding with a carrot stick. I don't have a carrot stick on hand, but I have a pen, right? So carrot stick is obviously 4 feet long. And you can use other things once your horses understand what the beep beep game is, but you can play with it in an arena or wherever paddock. So obviously, can you ride them with this carrot stick and rub them all over their hindquarters, their other hindquarters? And can you play friendly game with it while you're on your horse and have your horse that you're on know that it means nothing to them. It's not anything about them, okay? And so then the horse behind, that is the one that is either running up or getting close to, because usually that horse is trying to go faster and is pushing on the horse that's coming along. So that horse gets too close. So let's say this is the one horse's butt, and this horse ends up with his nose over or behind or tries to go around. So this horse's rider has to make sure that his only job is to keep his nose pointed at this horse's hindquarters, okay? Because if he goes this way, then what happens is if this horse kicks, yes, Lauren's ankle gets broken pretty easy because he kicks out and he hits the side of the horse rather than this horse in the chest, okay? But the key is that we don't want this horse to kick this horse. So that's why this person with his carrot stick gets to wave the carrot stick and bonk the horse behind on the nose so that the horse behind doesn't come running up his hindquarters. So instead of this horse having to get worried, laying his ears back and pinning him at the horse and saying, get out of my personal bubble, then this human gets to be the bad guy and kick for their personal horse. So this human that's on this horse gets the brownie points for his horse on being the leader and being able to take care of the other miscellaneous horses in the herd so that this horse doesn't have to be the bad horse. So the carrot stick gets to swing over the horse's butt and bonk the speedy horse in the nose to keep him back. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to play leapfrog at some point in time, but you won't do it where somebody comes galloping up from behind and goes around, okay? You'll do it where you're like, okay, we're going to change. And so this horse starts to slow down. This horse gets to go around, that sort of thing. Or you get to say, okay, I'm going to speed up and I'm going to go that way. And this person can still maintain their personal space by swinging their carrot stick and saying, hey, stay out of my personal space so that this horse doesn't get upset, okay? And then now this horse is in front, and then you can play the same game the other way. But it's really important that when we trail ride, that the fastest horse is in the back and the slowest horse is in the front. Now, of course, everybody's going to say, but my horse doesn't want to be a leader. He wants to be in the back or whatever. And that's where you get to go ahead and play a little bit of leapfrog or find another horse that's a more confident leader to lead the whole parade. So then I think, let me see, did I get most of that, Lauren, as far as your question goes? So does that make a little bit of sense, Lauren? You can go ahead. You want to unmute yourself, or I can as well? Let's see, where are you?
Yeah, it makes sense. It just riding along, those two horses just seem like they argue. It seems like it starts out with the gelded Palomino, and he's kind of he's that left-brain introvert that's always looking for trouble. He's always got bite marks all over him from other horses, and he's always bugging other horses. You know, it is what the owner says.
Yeah, and that's why this comes in, because we have to be the leader. Both.
Sure. Sometimes I don't usually ride with a carrot stick when I'm out on a trail ride, but I have used my hands when the other horses will ride nice. Yeah, or the end of my reins too, and I've kind of swatted at the other horse when it pins its ears, and that's helped.
Yeah, exactly. So savvy string, the ends of your reins, lots of those things can help. So once upon a time, I had my warm blood, and I was in the wintertime. I was going to ride at an indoor arena, and so it was just, general public gets to go ride. And this warm blood was a super schizoid, and I was in there, and there was this reiner in there, and the reiner thought it was really hilarious to come as I'm riding like along the rail. He would come head on down towards me on the rail, and he would slide stop right beside me. Freaked my poor little warm blood out to no end, because she's never seen a slide stop before in her life, and she was trapped in between him and the rail, and so she lost it. So I was like, jerk, because then he did it again. Thought it was funny. So then I went and got, because I live in cowboy land, right? So it's not like I can carry around my carrot stick and go whacking other people's horses, because that's just plain rude. Like when you're out, you know, if it's you and your friends and you're going trail riding, that's one thing. But if you're riding out in a public place, you can't do that. So what I did is I went and got my lead rope and pretended like I was teaching her to be a rope horse, right? Who's going to rope off of warm blood? But anyway, so I played friendly game with that rope. And so I twirled it here and I twirled it there and I twirled it. And man, that sucker came down to do a slide stop against me again. And so I was just lightly twirling it. And as soon as he went to set down, I spud that sucker up and that horse went that way. And so I didn't do it at him, right? I just made a very large amount of racket in my personal space, which my horse thought of as friendly game. And so it wasn't that I drove the other horse away. I protected my horse's personal space. That was my thought, but I didn't put energy towards that little reining horse and push him away. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because Pat talks about don't hit your horse, but if he walks into your space when you're doing your jumpy jacks and those things, you know, that, and that's kind of the same principle when you're riding. I can see carrying the rope off the carrot stick there and just having it handy for that situation. And
exactly. And you can do it. You can make it even really handy. Like this is a savvy string. It just happens to be the caro color. So 6 length, I bent it in half, just put it over your wrist and then grab the ends and put it through. And so now it's attached to you so you don't drop it, and you can easily swing it behind. If I didn't have a back on my chair, I could swing it behind me really easily, and then I don't have to worry about dropping it or carrying it, and I can just leave it there and grab it, and I can do whatever I want with it, but I don't have to handle it very much. So it's a really handy way to deal with our savvy string.
Yeah, that looks real handy for me.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
Actually,
I like that idea a lot.
So, but the biggest thing is making sure that we as the humans are the leaders in that group, and that's where we can be the ones that control whether or not our horse is being, you know, laying ears back at people. But especially like coming up and running and going past a horse, that makes it really difficult unless you give enough space. And so that's where make sure either your nose is pointed directly at your horse's hindquarters or you go out and around quite significantly, especially on one where you've got that issue of kicking in that you know of, because it's never fun to get kicked by somebody else's horse, but it happens a lot. And
first time for me.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Because I grew up field trialing, and so that was something that happened. It definitely would happen because people would get too close with horses that didn't know each other, and they didn't read the situation and what was happening in their own horse, and their own horse is already giving warning signs, and it's usually, though, it's not the warning signs that are coming from the horse that's going to get kicked. It's the other horse, because that horse isn't heeding those warning signs from that horse.
Yeah.
Cool. So hopefully that makes sense. And sometimes it's hard because, like I said, because people want to be on the fast horse. They're like, well, I'm just going to go up front. And that it doesn't make for good trail riding buddies to do that. So cool. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. How are we doing on time? Oh, goodness sakes. I need to talk faster or something. All right, let's go ahead here and go back. Okay, so this, Darcy's got a whole bunch of stuff here, but I think the one that I want to talk about the most, she said, okay, one of my goals is actually the first one on our list, so we'll go with that. She says, okay, my goals for summer was ride to the mailbox by myself and back, calm, cool, and connected. I tried earlier this spring, and I guess I forgot about it. We went down really well, and then some extra vehicle traffic and all calmness left. I dismounted, and we played with walking behind me for the half-mile home. So the big thing to think about, like, trail riding is obviously a thing, and going out by ourselves is even more difficult, because obviously prey animals want to be in a herd. So we want to try to make sure that as we play with our horses and want them to be confident going out, we have 5 areas of confidence that we have to think about. So can we get them to go ahead and leave the barn? And so one of the best ways that we can start with that is by ponying our horse out, if we can pony. If we can't pony, then we can do things like lead, if you can lead 2 horses, or have your buddy, husband, friend, whatever, lead a confident horse and then the younger horse, because I know that this particular horse is a younger horse, out together. So you can go out to the end of the driveway or the mailbox, wherever your point is. And it may not be that far to begin with. It may be just, you have a point that's a little bit closer, because a mile is a good bit of peace. How many of you have mailboxes that are a mile away? Not all of us, right? But even if it's shorter than that, can I go to that mailbox with another buddy horse? And remember that we have to make programs out of these things. So program starts with 4 to 7 days and then turns into like 28 days in order to change, or like a month basically to change a habit. So can we help our horse get confident out there? So we're going to keep doing that, and then you can make it more difficult and add more difficulties as you go on. But what happens is we tend to get greedy and forget that maybe we should have had a buddy horse with us, because is our horse confident to go there even with just the buddy? And whether or not we're on the ground or not. So ground is great first, safety first, right? Can I get there? Then can I do things like, can I just lead him there eventually by myself without another horse around? And this may not be that, it may not be working that far, but this will transfer to things like trail riding or things like that when you go further and further out, so that it can be a longer ride. So can I get there? But leading, I'm still leading. When I ride my horse, I'm not in front of him. Okay. So when you have a buddy horse, that buddy horse that's good and knows where he's going, you can lead him out there, or ponying, right? That's where, like, if you think about mares and foals, right? The mare usually goes first and the foal comes along beside, right? Or right in behind. And so that's what we're emulating, is beginning to get that confidence going. So when you're leading mare and you're following. But when you're riding your horse, you're sitting in the middle of him, right? And so he's leading. So that's where when we play touch it game, how many of you know what touch it game is, right? So when we play touch it game, we typically do that from zone 3, okay? But then as we get more and more advanced, we go to zone 5. So then can I make it to the mailbox from zone 3, driving game, then zone 4, driving game, then zone 5, driving game. Then I might go ahead and say, okay, can I get on and do that, right? And at any point you could try it going through, but there's lots of things that you can do to help gain his confidence, so that he goes, oh, I'm leading and I know where I'm going. And can I do that? And best to do with one line, because you're going to know real quick if he's veering on and off and if he's not confident, because you won't have that straight line. So that's where touch it comes in really handy. Oh, sorry, talking too much. But I don't have to wear a mask because I'm in my own house. Okay, so does that make sense a little bit on that, Darcy?
Yes, and we've rode down there with the lesson girls, many
Cool.
times.
Cool. So then it's like, okay, now we have to go, okay, can we do it by ourselves? And how do we get there by ourselves? And you're going to find your thresholds along the way, right? Especially when you start to do your driving games, or when you're by yourself. So approaching and retreating that threshold is really important, so that you don't go past the threshold. If you go past the threshold too far, then you're going to lose all the confidence that you've built. So that's where you have to play with it and go, okay, then maybe there's a good grazing spot. I happen to know that it's not exactly the best terrain at your driveway, because it drops off on both sides, right? I think across the road, just past the driveway, there's a little spot that you could actually stand flat and maybe they could eat, but I can't remember if that was in wheat or not. So you may have to end up depositing yourself a little, thing of grain or a pile of alfalfa or something that makes it, you know, some real good reason to go there and have a hangout spot can also be really helpful for that. Does that make sense?
Yep, I thought of that as well.
Yeah.
So you're saying, well, the unevenness, if I'm on the ground, who cares? He can eat wherever. But in the saddle, it gets a little awkward if he
exactly,
starts
especially
moving
if
his
your feet are all the way in the down in the ditch and it's kind of marshy there. So
yeah.
So but just even if you're on the ground thinking about, can I play 7 games out there? Can I go sideways? Can I do stuff? Whatever. And then I go out there and I rest and I hang out for half an hour and graze until he goes, oh, I'd really rather just miss this part in the middle where I'm doing sideways things or whatever. But playing with that to build his confidence is super, super important. And you can even build the point to point with the other horses out there. Make it a habit that you go out there and you graze in that spot when you're taking the lesson girls out there, and stop and eat, and then, you know, come back, so that he goes, oh, I really like it out there. And there's something, because that's all when you leave the confinements of your, you know, your barnyard area, and you don't have your buddies with you, that's when that gets to be more difficult. And he's still young yet. So, and most of your stuff is done, you know, right around that barnyard area.
Right. Yep. Okay. Thanks. The rest of it's kind of whining.
The rest of it is just, you've got to do it, right? So, dragging things and cows, the problem is you have no cows that you can go play with. So that's just about making time to go spend some time with cows and such. So that's the biggest thing there. And then I think, was it you that was talking about canter, or and maintaining gait in here a little bit.
Yeah, and then he went to that trotting.
Yeah, and so that's what happens too, is that so what happened for Darcy is that she did a clinic that was more about not with me, but with somebody else, that was more about finesse and about moving pieces and parts, but doing it with a lot with Rain. And so so he had a lot of collection going on, and so she over collected him, and he started trotting. So how many have had that trouble happen? It happens. So that, because a lot of times people will say that in order to get your gaited horse to gait, you have to collect him. And unfortunately, depending on where he's at on the spectrum, that doesn't necessarily help. And if you get tension, that's a big deal. But the thing for Darcy is she didn't necessarily get tension because he wasn't tense. But what happened is that he kind of just hid behind the bridle and got back off of it and over collected his head, not necessarily his back, but then started to shorten his stride behind. And when you shorten the stride behind, you change the gait, which happened to be a trot. And so that doesn't help us much. So that's where freestyle is beautiful. Can you ride on a loose rein? Can you throw that rein away and let him stick his nose out so that he can go ahead and swing a little bit more, and we don't shorten the stride behind on those hind legs? And so doesn't mean that you're not going to want to collect him in the end, but we have to watch about how much we collect them. And so in natural horsemanship, we say 10% of our riding, or 10% of our horsemanship should be collected riding. Now, in the beginning, that's like very little. Like when I start a colt, my collected riding is minuscule. It might be my backup is, you know, and so of the 2 hours that I play with the horse, you know, and I'm certainly not backing him up 10 minutes that whole time, probably. But that's my collected time, right? And so then as you go further and further along, you've done way more freestyle riding in the beginning of your horse's upbringing. And then as you go further along, you can do more collected later on. But there's a happy medium in there. And so if you go, oops, I went over that amount, then you have to go balance it back out with your freestyle riding on a loose rein. Okay, super. Okay, let's see what we have next. Oh, Chris, he was here. There he is. He's still there. Okay, so Chris says, what is the best bit to use on a young gaited horse? He has a left brain introvert. And so we'll do because he's actually got 2 questions here. So we'll do these separately. So basically, Tom Dorrance said the best bit to use on a horse is the one they like the best. Okay. So the best is all in perspective, right? For me, like if I'm personally starting a young walking horse, they're going to start in a halter. Then I'm going to go to a snaffle. Then eventually I'll probably go to a cradle. I may play with a bozal in there somewhere. And eventually as they get older, I'm going to head towards a curb bit. Like my old man who I can ride bridleless, I want to ride him in a spade bit because it's fancy, not because I need it, because it's an art form, right? So, so really thinking about what I want my horses to be able to go in almost anything. So it doesn't matter to me, which is the perfect bit, but I want them to be overall happy in anything that I put them on in. So in general, your snaffle, your halter is going to be the easiest to get the clearest amount of communication to them. And so that's really helpful, especially in the beginning, for teaching them to go ahead and have the ability to collect a little bit and use their body well. Doesn't mean that, like, I know your young horse has already been in a curb, and many of ours have, because they're gaited horses. And so everybody believes that you have to have, a super long shanked something to ride them in. And it doesn't mean that you can't ride them in that, but that's like, they go straight. Half the time I've seen people actually start them in those bits. And so it doesn't, like, a lot of times if you've started them in a halter and then go to a snaffle, you want to ease them up into that because their mouth is fairly sensitive, because you've brought them up that way so that you're not damaging or offending them in any way in their mouth. So there isn't really what is the best bit. It's a matter of what they like the best and what you can clearly communicate to them in. And so like for Peaches, using, she's in a little Mylar short shank, broken in three places, but not because they're Mylar, so they don't, fold in half, bit with a really low little port. She seems to be pretty happy in that, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to try her in a snaffle as well. And so being able to play with that is important. So bits is a big deal, and it's a matter of what are we doing. So curb bits are designed for vertical flexion, not lateral flexion. Okay. And so if we need control, if we have control issues, then we need to be able to have lateral flexion. And so that's where those snaffles come in, really super helpful. But also, if we want to develop our gait and have a better gait as we go forward, in a gaited horse or even in a trotting horse, if we want to have more power and have them lift their withers and such, we want to make sure that we can use the longitudinal flexion as well as the latitudinal flexion. Latitudinal flexion and longitudinal flexion. Sorry, I got those backwards. Helps. It's always so much fun to be dyslexic, right? So anyway, because part of that bend gives us the lift, whereas a curb bit works on just trying to give us the lift without the bend. And so it doesn't mean that they don't work simultaneously. That's why once you go up the levels, like say in dressage, you end up in a double bridle bit. But it's not because you needed it for control. It's because you wanted the extra lift that comes from that. But they already knew this, the lateral bending, and then they get to learn this. Does that make sense, Chris? A little bit? Cool. And then he also asked, how long do you usually work your horse? What are the cues to look for before the horse checks out and gets bored? In an effort to end on a happy note, I think I run my training too short. Yes. So that's almost never a bad choice, especially if you're doing it yourself, because you have all the time in the world to get wherever it is that you're getting. So making sure that we think about our sessions. Typically for me, If I'm riding a younger horse, which you have an older horse and a younger horse, when I'm riding my younger horses, they tend to be a lot longer sessions because I play on the ground for long enough to make sure that they're safe for me to get on. So my groundwork sessions become fairly long. So a lot of times I play with my horses for about an hour and a half. If they're older, typically it's much shorter unless there's something particular that I want to work on. And then it might take longer because I'm training and I'm teaching them something. The younger horses, I have so much to teach them that it seems like never ending as to where, what am I doing? And so the fun thing is if you have a plan and if it's interesting and it's not drilling on your horse, then you can spend a lot of time doing it, as long as it's not physically taxing. And so that's where like having the lists of things that we can do with our horses, like the Pirelli checklists, is super great because it keeps us interesting so that we're not doing the same boring thing over and over again. Because if we continue to do the same boring thing over and over again, then our horses do check out. And so that's where, especially for us that ride gaited horses, when we tend to just go around and around and around and around and around the outside of the arena. And that is really boring. Unless you're doing things like thinking about, can I get a little bit better gait? Can I do this? And then rewarding those things when they do happen so that your horse knows what is the point of whatever it is that I'm doing. And so on the left brain introverts, like your filly is, that's where if you're wanting to work on consistency of gait or having a little bit more consistency, sometimes it's better to be out in like a pasture or a bigger field. So that you can have a little bit of extra go-go juice just from the environment change. Now, some of us don't need that because we have extroverts to begin with, and by God, it's nicer to be in a smaller contained area. But if you happen to have an introvert that doesn't like to go, getting out and going someplace is awesome. So a bigger arena or maybe even out in their own pasture. So like Darcy's having trouble getting to the mailbox, and she has an introvert, or he's more of an introvert as well. So, one of the things that you might do is you might put your horses in pens so that they're not all helping you, or put them in a field adjacent and go ride the perimeter of his own pasture field. And that can be another place to play so that you're in your pasture, you're in a safer area, and you can play with a little bit more, lengthening of speed or consistency out there going somewhere. It can help with that. But the time frame, it's mostly about being interesting and not drilling your horses to keep them from checking out. But yeah, Linda Pirelli always says short and sweet. And so she'll do more short and sweet than anything. And a lot of times, professional trainers don't have the amount of time that we do to train our own horses. So like if I'm professionally training horses, I can't spend an hour and a half on each horse and think that I'm going to make any money, right? So their training times are much shorter, right? So make a plan as to what is it that you're going to do in those 20 minutes, if that's what you're going to be after. Like my warm blood colt that I just started under saddle, 20 minutes, I wouldn't even be on him yet. There's no way, right? So I have to obviously give him more time. That's why colt starting takes more time, right? And realistically should cost more, but somehow or another it doesn't. So anyway, hopefully that works. Yes, Chris, does that make sense? Super. You can unmute yourself. You don't have to be silent, but I do like head shaking. Cool. All right, I have one more. Where'd it go? But it started in the middle of this. I wasn't sure if I was going to get to this one, and she wasn't on the call. So, but I think we're okay. Are you guys okay to go just a little bit longer? All right, super. So this is from Rita. I don't think I started. She says, you know me, it's all about canter with Briscoe and I. Laugh out loud. We have made some great improvements, but I feel like it's all my miscommunication with him / timing. Wondering if my someday goal of being able to pursue the Garocha pole is at a canter is a pipe dream. Never had a horse that had this struggle. I know you have given me great instruction, but it seems like I'm just not able to connect the dots in the arena. We are both okay on the trails. So the thing for Rita, is that she's now able to actually get a canter on the trail, but usually she's going on a slight incline up like a logging road, okay? And she can get it in the arena, but he'll switch behind a little bit. He has some other miscellaneous troubles and such. So the biggest thing, Rita, is not to worry about it. You've got it on the trails and it will come. It's just about developing it and making sure that we keep nurturing that. And yes, not all gaited horses are created equal on their canter, for sure. And because our horses have the ability to pace, we have the ability to crossfire really well. How many of you have had crossfiring happen with your gaited horse significantly? Yeah. And that's because when they crossfire, they're actually pacing on one side of their body and cantering on the other side of their body. And they're perfectly okay with pacing. Like, that doesn't bother them a bit. And the cantering thing on the other side, yeah, the uncomfortable thing is that you're up there bouncing around like a dork and you've probably already bounced your back out. So they don't mind switching back and forth like that. That's totally seems normal to them. But we have to play with that a little bit. And so one of the things that happens with Briscoe is that Briscoe drops one shoulder more than the other. And so we have to think about picking it up and sitting it back over here so you can canter this way. So when he drops this shoulder over here, then it's real easy for this hind leg to get going, oh, well, I need to go that way. So that's when he starts to crossfire. So now he's pacing on this side of his body and kind of cantering on this side of his body. So it becomes really uncomfortable. So the biggest thing that we have to be able to do is have control of the shoulder for him. And can I pick it up and can I move it over? And we may or may not be able to do that at a canter, but can we do it at a walk? Can we do it at an intermediate gait? Can we do it at a stop and have it happen without using our reins? And how reliable is that? So can I use my leg to pick him up and move him over rather than my reins? I'm going to use my reins to help him if I need to, but if I need to be able to eventually, can I do it with just my leg? Can I just move that shoulder over and have that get out of the way? Linda Pirelli calls this swinging the shoulders when you actually get to canter. And it's part of what she calls the lead change scale, the flying lead change scale, something like that. I have to go back and remember exactly what she calls the whole thing, but there's a process. But can I move those shoulders over is a process to actually being able to make a flying change. But in this case, what's happening is he's dumping it on the wrong way, and then he changes on his own, basically behind, but he forgets the front. And so that's one of his big things. But the other thing that you have, Rita, coming up for you, and I think that this isn't the case for all of you, but those of us that have the benefit of living in the north and having a lot of snow end up with this as an actual benefit. And because snow isn't necessarily helpful for our gaited horses with their gait when we're trying to gait. However, snow is really useful for cantering because basically they have to lift up and jump up out of it. So I'm really excited and hoping that you're going to have a nice deep snow year, Rita. I almost had enough this year. I started to teach one of my horses to canter, and I did it on the ground to begin with. And so that's where we look, or where I like that. So some of you don't get this benefit, but if you don't have the benefit of snow, you have the benefit of jumps. Snow is a little bit easier because they don't have to actually decide where they're going to take off and land at versus a jump. So you can emulate jumping or using jump like I'll use snow. And so the good thing is that in my snow, I need it to be deep enough. So the other day I had about 6 inches in my arena, and I had a little snowdrift that was a little deeper, and that was the best place. So 6 inches isn't quite enough. Like I like about a foot, but the key is that it can't be slippery underneath. So I have to have good footing underneath, and they can't be snowballing up. So hopefully, Rita, I'm looking forward to winter for you, and we'll hopefully talk about snow at some point in time for you and whether or not that helps you with cantering. But you can always use jumps. So jumps is part of that as well, but we can't have that many jumps throughout an arena. And obviously in the snow, the same thing happens. It's like jumping. And so they have to leap up out of that snow and lift the front end. And so again, that's part of that is carrying power. How much carrying power can I have on my hindquarters to teach my horse to lift up? So your Garocher pole will need that at some point in time to be able to do that cute little canter and have it be there. But I know it's in there, so don't fret. It will happen. And that's part of what happens with us, is that we get real direct line on things in general, canter being one of them, gait being another. And when we get real direct line, that's when we end up messing other things up or making things worse, because we've gotten so direct line rather than going around about it at a different way. And so that's why wait till winter, Rita. Hopefully you'll have enough snow, or come join me when it snows really bad. So anyway, so those are, I think, all of my questions. Those are all my questions. Oh no, I missed one. I think. Yes, this one. Her name is Karen. So I'm going to do this one too. This is Karen, and she says, "Hi Jenny, here's my question. How can I ask my Icelandic horse to tolt from the ground? We had some problems with tolt from the saddle. He got tense and scared, and therefore I gave up riding tolt for a while. Now I'm having difficulties to find that clear tolt again. Probably it would be better to start again from the ground rather than from the saddle." Okay. So yeah, so here's the deal. Oh, there you are. So I thought you were on here. So she, so one of the things that happens with tolt is that it's a rack. And so a lot of times in, when people teach a rack, they teach them by lifting the head way up and shaking the head from side to side. Okay. So that's the typical way of, getting them all up here, which causes them to be hollow and causes them to be emotional. So it's no wonder you had an emotional malfunction to begin with, because that's how some people teach it, right? So yes, you can teach it from the ground. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the Gaited Horse course. And so what happens basically is that you're going to ask them to speed up. So this is back to the question about where does my gait begin? And so you have your normal walk, right? And so what you're going to play with is, can I ask my horse to extend that walk? Because a tolt is still an even 4-beat gait, okay? And which a walk is still an even 4-beat gait. Basically the difference between, say, a running walk and a tolt is where their head is placed, basically, and what their back is doing. Because if their back is lifted and round, then they're going to end up with a head shake. If their back is hollow, then they will end up with a rack or a tolt. Okay. And so that's where we go, okay, can we do this? And can an Icelandic do a running walk? You betcha. And that's kind of the cool thing. Now, if you're showing, that's not going to be something that they want. They're going to want to see a rack, but it's still an even 4-beat gait. So we're looking for 4-beat gait no matter what, but it's all about, can I go ahead and move that speed up a little bit? So, so what you can do is you can invite them to go just a little bit faster and see if you can't put a little driving behind them, but you're not going to want to push them into the trot. Okay, you're going to see, can I get just a little bit of an extension of that walk? If they do go into a trot, there's a couple of things you can do. You can yo-yo them down, right? That can say no. Or you can push them sideways until they walk again. And it might be that slow walk, but you're going to release to the walk. And then you're going to say, now I need you to speed up again. Okay. And so you just play with that on the ground until you can find it with them and you're just going to play with your accelerator. So it's just like on your car, you're not going to slam it to the ground. You're just going to give them a little bit of gas and see if you can get it. Then you might back them off a little bit, give them a little bit of gas, see if you can find it. And you'll just play with that a little bit, but playing with bending them is usually more helpful than just a yo-yo down. However, the yo-yo will probably throw the head in the air, and there may be a little bit of rack that you get. Now, when you do get your tolt, go ahead and disengage and bring them in. So don't try and ask for it to be a lap of it. So we have to reward the slightest try. So anytime that you get a little bit going and you're like, oh, look, there's a little bit of told, I'm going to slow it down and I'm going to say, thank you, come on in, and we're going to relax. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Okay.
And you can do the same thing when you're riding as well. You're just going to see, can I speed up the walk without going into the trot? So that's where you play with that. And again, kind of like the first question when she asked if she could have a horse that trotted and gaited, you're going to try not to hit that trot. You're going to just go for the gait and then back off of it a little bit, go for the gait, and then go ahead and say, can you come back? But you're going to have to ride it in your body rather than letting yourself go into that trot. You know, can I do 1, 2, 3, 4? And that's where fluidity comes in to play a lot. And so that's the biggest thing to remember there is pedaling. Because are you a Pedaling student?
Pedaling? Yeah, I know that.
You know pedaling? So pedaling, we want to be able to pedal and keep our hips going side to side, okay?
Okay.
And so the thing is that if you've played with pedaling and sitting trot, remember that you're not doing 2 beats, you're doing 4 beats, not 2. And so you can't go pedaling and go boom, 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 boom. It's pedaling, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And so your shoulders do different than what your hind end does. Whereas in trot, they do diagonal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah. The problem is that he is a right brain introvert, and he is very scared and emotional with the tilt.
Yes.
So I decided to give up tilt, but now I have to and he's fine now. He's responsive and calm and connected. All is okay. But now I've lost the tilt completely. What I get is pace, and I do.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So you
That's
have.
good?
Yes, it's good. So you have, because that means you have both ends of the spectrum still, okay? So
yeah, good.
Perfect. So when you get pace,
Yeah.
then all we have to do is put a little bend in him.
I see. Okay.
Just a little. And so if you put too much of a bend in him, you'll probably end up at trot, because he also does trot fairly well. And so if you can put a little bend in him, then you can go ahead and break that pace. Because here's the deal, guys. This is key, okay, for all of you. Okay, gaited horses have, when they are able to do a lateral, both legs on the same side move at the same time, okay? If you imagine yourselves, just imagine yourselves standing on 4 legs, right? If you pick up 2 legs on one side, what are you going to have to do to the other side or to your body in order to not fall down? You're going to have to be really stiff through your top line, through your back, right? In order to not fall down. So if you're pacing, all you have to do is put a little bend in there. She's like, go away. This is the best part. So fun. So that would be my kids. They would be like, are you done yet? No, I'm not done yet, right? So when they're pacing, if you put a little bend in them and get them to relax just a little bit and soften in their core, that's when you're going to go ahead and get the pace to break up, because then it breaks up the footfall, because they're now no longer stiff through their body. And so if you've got pace, that's perfect, because now you can just come back from pace just a little bit. And it's not so much about their head, but you may even just be able to lift up one rein in that pace and just say, hey, could you try it? And just give them a little tiny bend. But the biggest thing is if you can push a little bit with your inside leg, whichever hand you're lifting with, just push a little bit in what Pat would call position B or C. You may have to go to position D and move that rib cage over, and just a teeny tiny touch. And more than likely, you'll feel a little change. Now, when you put your hand down, they may go back to pacing, but you just do it again. And so you just keep repeating until he goes, oh, this is the one that you want. So you're making the wrong thing difficult. You're making the pace difficult by picking up the rein. And then you're making it easy and telling him, yes, that's what I wanted, by releasing the rein. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you got flying pace, then you'll be able to get your tolt back fairly easy. So that's probably where I would work it, as I would go up to pace and then come back to tolt.
Yeah.
And that way you won't have to do this number of things in order to get that.
Yeah. Yes, that helped me a lot, because I thought if I get pace, that the worst thing I could get. No? But if it's okay, great.
No, no, because,
Yeah.
and especially in the Icelandics, like, so, like, the Icelandics, like us that ride gaited horses, or like ride walking horses, like, pace is a bad word, but for you, it's not a bad word, because it's a great thing for you guys to have that flying pace. And so if you've got it, all you have to do is just put a little bend in them and push them a little bit lateral. And yes, they're going to slow down because he can't go as fast as he can at that flying pace with the tolts. And so what you're going to look for is you're going to look for him to lift his back and round a little bit too. And so you can even give release to those sorts of things, and that will be fine. But yeah, just put a little lateral in him and he'll be fine. It's not so much about the head, it's more about the rib cage.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Whew. I got through the list, that unless anybody sent me something like right at the last like 10 minutes, because I didn't check my email and such right before then. But any other dying questions that you cannot live without? And obviously, you know, if you want, I have my Gaited Horse course, which is the next 6 months of training. Some of you guys are in, and I'm super excited to get started. I know, right? Or that we're in the last 6 months and are gonna go ahead and stick with me for more Q&As, because I love talking and telling you guys how to help a lot of these things. So any other dying questions that we want to get answered before so long? Oh, the other thing that I am contemplating doing is not necessarily, because my Q&As or my Gaited Horse course is specific for my Gaited Horse people. We obviously talk about horsemanship as well in our Q&As, but also I've been thinking about for my non-gaited people, like I see Alicia and such in here that I know don't have a gaited horse. I've been contemplating doing a Q&A maybe once a month or something, where I might have people involved in that. And if that is something that might interest you, email me and let me know. And because I'm contemplating putting that together too, so that I can keep my non-gaited people, you know, going with things like, because obviously Beep Beep Game and all sorts of other Pirelli stuff is non-denominational. So it doesn't matter what breed you're on, but to keep them going. So I'm thinking about doing some Q&As like that. But anybody else have any questions? Ooh, Tina has her hand raised. Let me see. Yay. Okay.
Yep.
Are you muted or are you unmuted?
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, cool. I was just wondering, that was really good advice on breaking up the pace. My problem is she pops up into a trot. Does the same thing work?
Yeah, it can work as well. It's harder from the trot than the pace, because they can go ahead and continue trotting, just doing a better trot. But it's worth the try. And so basically what you're going to do is you can push them sideways until they come, and they may have to slow down quite a bit, because you're going to basically do like a leg yield out, and push them until you get them to break into a gait, which may be a normal walk. But it's something, it's the beginning of getting them to understand that they need to change the gaits. Does that make sense, Tina?
Yeah.
And so, yes, it will work. It's not, it takes a little bit more feel, so it's a little bit more difficult than coming from the pace. The pace is way easier to fix than the horse that's already trotting. So that's why a lot of times I don't advise gaited people to actually trot their gaited horse until their gait is really good. Because like the first gal, what was her name? That asked the first question? Christy, who asked the first question about her horse wanting to be able to trot and gait her horse, and her horse is a Missouri Fox trotter, that if we put trot in too soon, it's really hard to get gait. But that's why I try not to get people to trot as much, but it's way easier to break it down from the pace, I find. But the biggest thing for you is you're going to try it. You're going to see if it works. And a lot of times it works really well. I had a horse this summer that was a student's that they're like, we can't get this thing to gait at all. And it took me like 2 minutes to get it to gait from trotting. But a lot of that also is that I have to ride it in my body, and I have to know what the gait feels like. Have you ridden very many gaited horses, Tina?
I have a Paso, and so he's really easy.
Yes.
This is a mule out of a Foxtrotter mare.
Oh yeah, that great big mule. Yes.
Yeah, that's her.
So yeah, and so here becomes the difficulty because the potential. Have you felt a gait on your big mule?
She will you can kind of get her walking up a little faster, and then she will hit something, but I might get like 4 yards out of it, and then she'll either pop up into a trot to try to catch the other horse, or she'll fall back down into her walk.
Okay, perfect. So that's a really great way that you described that. And so what happens here is that we want to catch her and reward her prior to her popping up into the trot. Okay. So, and so mules, the deal with a mule obviously is that they're half-ass, right? And, so now it depends on what half-ass you have that was your half-ass part, right? Because there are gaited asses out there. I love being able to talk about mules because I get to say things like ass on purpose. So depending on who you have as a sire, because typically it's the sire, right? Whether or not they were actually gaited or not. But the deal is that it's like that throttle. So you're gonna push on the throttle. So you're following. It sounds like the times when you find that little bit of gait for her is when you're following her buddy, right? And maybe it's even that passive.
Yeah.
And so best if it is a gaited horse, because then at least they're giving you the rhythm that the gait has. So they're providing a little bit of beat for you. Mm-hmm. And that's the key, is that beat is part of it. So we have to remain, have a beat. But I'm sure there's been a time when you've walked along with somebody and you've gotten in time with their stride, right? Just a normal person. Yeah. Like when you're walking on your own 2 feet, right? You get in time with somebody and you'll walk with them. And so that's the same thing that happens with horses, is you'll get in time with them. The thing with a Pasofino is that they're quick little feetses, right? And versus the Foxtrotter is not going to be as quick as with the feet in the rhythm, but that's all right. So go ahead and let the horse move out in front of you that you're following, and make sure you're in good communication with that person. So as soon as you start to feel your horse going and you feel like, oh, hey, we're doing good, start to tell that person in front of you to back off so that she's not going so fast, so that the distance between the two of you doesn't continue to increase. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, get it for a couple of strides, and then both of you come to a stop and reward your mule.
Okay.
And so that's going to be probably a little bit better tactic for the mule than pushing her sideways. You can definitely try the pushing her sideways and see. How old is the mule?
She's like 14, and I really haven't done much to try to develop her gait. My husband has a grade walking horse mare we just got. She's got a little more pep than his old mare. Mm-hmm. So I'm having a little bit more, I got a little bit more to work with now behind this extrovert mare.
Gotcha.
Than I had before. So that's helping a bit. And then, it's getting the time, and, Maggie, the mule, she's kind of a left brain introvert, right brain introvert cusp.
Gotcha.
And so she'll, I don't have the energy to work with like I had with my Paso, so I'm finding myself kind of at a loss for ideas.
Yeah. So the other thing is don't forget to use your cookies on that mule.
Yeah.
And so when you get that, like when you go and you find that you feel that little bit of speed up and you're like, oh, there it is, stop and give her a cookie. Okay. And so mules are so wicked smart. It won't take her very long to go, there's something in this for me. And you just have to be pretty consistent on it. But that's you have a tougher route for sure. But the fact that you have something and you found a spot where you found it is super good. So congratulations on that. Yay.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. All right, you guys, any other dying questions? I don't have any hands raising or anybody flailing their hands. All right, super. Cool. Well, I'm super glad that I got to spend some time with you. And so some of you I get to see in my Gaited Horse course coming up. Our first call is on Wednesday. And so if you guys are not coming and joining me, which I'm super excited about you can still sign up and go ahead and shoot me an email or whatever, and we can get you signed up. And I look forward to seeing you guys. And if some of you are headed into winter, because I know for some people winter time and riding isn't so good, right? Of course, I'll be offering it again in the springtime. So very excited, and thank you for spending your Halloween morning with me. And hopefully you guys will either get to take people trick-or-treating or see lots of little munchkins at your door. We have a COVID safe version going on in our neighborhood / farm area. So I'm looking very forward to it. My kids are super excited because they were thinking that Halloween was canceled this year. So, all right.
Your pumpkins looked cute.
Oh, weren't those great? That was the first time that I actually got to do pumpkins, and it was fun. Like most of the time I'm worried that the kids are going to cut their fingers off or something. And so yeah, we had a really good time. And Tana, like I helped them with their tops, and then they were of course scooping and whatevering. Sorry, totally getting off horse subject. Scooping and whatevering, and then I went and did mine, and Tana continued to work. She's like, well, let me just get all the yuckies out of yours. I was like, score, that's my least favorite part. And then, most of the time I just had to maybe poke the thing in first, and then they could saw around, and then I'd have to help them a little bit. Whereas in the years past, man, I've been out there, where do you want this to go? Okay. And try and make their pumpkin look like they want it to. And so I got to do my own, and then they helped me, and it was really fun. And we got tons of seeds, which is, I think, ultimately the best part.
Did you roast them? You roasted the seeds?
Yeah. I did 4 different batches. So here's the thing. We did one with just Lowry salt and olive oil. We did one with garlic powder and olive oil and salt, because I didn't have any garlic salt. And then we did one with taco seasoning. That was for the husband. And then we had a little bit left over, so we did a 4th batch, which was the best batch, of course, because I didn't have as many. And we did olive oil, lime juice, and a lot of garlic powder and some salt. And that was the best. In case any of you are going to do it, that was super yummy. And it was even good to lick my fingers after I'd got them all mixed up. So, but it was really good afterwards. So that's my Halloween tidbit on my 4 recipes of pumpkin seeds.
Better write it down for next year.
No kidding. I'll totally forget. Actually, I have this video now.
Oh, there you go.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Love you all.
Happy Halloween. Bye.
Happy Halloween. I'll see you next time.